Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a look at one of the most legendary, captivating, and honestly completely misunderstood wonders of the ancient world. We're talking about the Colossus of Rhodes. Built way back in 280 BC, this towering monument to the Greek sun god Helios was famous across the entire globe. But the image you probably have of it in your head right now, yeah, it might be entirely wrong. So let's dig into the evidence and separate the magnificent historical facts from centuries of fiction. All right, let's just tackle the elephant in the room right away. When you picture the Colossus of Rhodes, what do you see? If you're like most of us, you're imagining this gigantic bronze man, legs spread wide apart across a harbor entrance, holding up a blazing torch while these grand ancient ships sail right between his legs, right? It is an absolutely iconic image. But here's the thing. Is it actually true? Well, hate to burst the bubble, but the reality check here is pretty stark. The whole harbor-straddling Colossus is a complete engineering impossibility. Modern analyses tell us that a bronze statue of this scale, built with its legs spread that wide, would have immediately collapsed under its own massive weight. Plus, even if the ancient Rhodians had somehow pulled it off, building it across the harbor mouth would have completely closed their port for the entire construction process. And worse, when it eventually fell down, which it did, those massive bronze legs would have completely blocked the harbor, trapping their own fleet inside. I mean, they simply didn't have the dredging technology to fish a fallen skyscraper out of their waters. Section 1. The Harbor Straddling Myth, a Medieval Fabrication. So if they didn't build it that way, where did this incredibly persistent lie actually come from? Well, it turns out it was basically a massive game of historical telephone. It all started with an ancient dedication text that vaguely stated the Rhodians established freedom over the sea and land. Fast forward to 1395, and an Italian tourist reports a local rumor that one of the statue's feet stood where a local church was located. You know how it is, medieval imaginations just ran wild with that. Later on, Shakespeare totally cemented the error in Julius Caesar. And then, Emma Lazarus immortalized it with her poem on the Statue of Liberty, talking about conquering limbs astride from land to land. A little bit of poetic license completely warped our historical memory. Moving on to Section 2, a monument to victory forged from a siege. Let's leave the myths behind for a second, because the real reason the Colossus was built is actually an incredible story of military survival. In the late 4th century BC, the island of Rhodes was a major Mediterranean powerhouse, and they were allied with Ptolemy I of Egypt. Naturally, that made them a target. A rival, Antigonus I, sent his son Demetrius to stage a massive invasion in 305 BC. Demetrius besieged the city with a huge army and navy for an entire year. It was a brutal, desperate standoff. But finally, in 304 BC, Ptolemy sent a fleet of relief ships. Facing this fresh threat, Demetrius just completely abandoned the siege. He fled in such a massive hurry that his army left behind almost all of their incredibly heavy and extremely valuable siege equipment. And that brings us to this staggering number right here, 300 talents. That is the massive amount of money the Rhodians earned by selling off Demetrius's abandoned gear. It was an absolute fortune. So to celebrate their miraculous victory and, surviving, they decided to take this massive windfall and pour it into building a colossal trophy dedicated to their patron sun god, Helios. Section 3. Engineering and Ancient God. Building the sun god, Helios. Okay, so how do you actually build a god? First, let's talk scale. Ancient descriptions put the height of the Colossus at about 70 cubits. That translates to roughly 33 meters, or 108 feet tall. To help you visualize that, if you measure the modern Statue of Liberty from her heel to the very top of her head, the Colossus of Rhodes was about 2/3 that exact height. It was, without a doubt, the tallest statue in the ancient world. Now, to build a structure of that unprecedented size, you don't just hire anyone. You need a master. The Rhodians commissioned a native islander named Chares of Lindos, and Chares had a serious pedigree. He was the pupil of the legendary sculptor Lysippos, a guy who had already successfully built a towering 22-meter-high bronze statue of Zeus over in Tarentum. So Chares definitely knew how to work at scale. Construction kicked off in 292 BC and took 12 long years to finish. But seriously, how did they assemble a 33-meter statue without modern cranes? For that, we look to an ancient writer named Philo of Byzantium, who gives us a really prominent theory. According to him, Chares built it in situ, basically right on the spot. He cast a horizontal ring of the statue, let it set, and then pile a massive mound of earth all the way around that finished section. That dirt acted as a ramp and a temporary floor, letting workers step up and cast the next layer from a brand new ground level. They just kept burying the completed work as they went up until they finally reached the head. The internal engineering was absolutely brilliant too. It wasn't a hollow shell, but it wasn't solid bronze either. It relied on a super heavy inner core, standing on a 15-meter marble pedestal. Inside, they used forged iron bars radiating outward to form a skeleton and packed it with large stone blocks for stability. Then, over that skeleton, they riveted an outer shell of curved bronze plates. And here's a cool detail. They cleverly forged the plates thicker at the ankles and thinner at the top so it wouldn't be top-heavy. And remember, a lot of that metal came directly from the enemy's abandoned weapons. Talk about the ultimate flex! So, if he wasn't doing the whole legs apart, holding a torch routine, what did the real Colossus actually look like? Well, we don't have the original blueprints, but scholars believe the pose was actually quite standard for that era. The head likely had curly hair projecting sun rays, which matches Rhodian coins from that time. As for the body, based on a relief found in a nearby temple, it's highly likely Helios was just standing normally, legs together, or maybe in a slight stride, with one hand raised to shield his eyes, as if he was saluting the rising sun.
Section 4. The Fall and Ruins. A giant brought to its knees.
Despite being an absolute marvel, its glory was incredibly short-lived. Here is the tragic timeline. Completed in 280 BC, it stood tall, gleaming in the sun, for only 54 years. In 226 BC, a massive earthquake struck the island. The intense shaking caused the statue to snap violently right at its weakest point, the knees, crashing down onto the land. It's such a cruel irony. It took 12 years to build, stood as a statue for a mere 54 years, but lay on the ground as a massive, awe-inspiring ruin for over 800 years. But here's the thing. Even completely shattered, it was still a major tourist attraction. The Roman author Pliny the Elder traveled to see the fallen giant in the 1st century AD, and his description is just incredible. He noted that even in ruins, it was awe-inspiring. He wrote, "Few men can clasp the thumb in their arms." He actually looked inside the broken limbs and described seeing vast caverns yawning in the interior, filled with the massive rocks that Shears had packed inside to steady it. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't they just put it back up? They totally had the chance. King Ptolemy III of Egypt actually offered to pay for the entire reconstruction. Blank check. But the Rhodians consulted the famous Oracle of Delphi first, and the Oracle gave them a really stark warning, which made them terrified that by rebuilding it, they would deeply offend Helios himself. Paralyzed by that religious fear, they politely declined the king's money and just left their masterpiece right there in the dirt. Section 5. The 900 Camels Legend. Disappearance of the bronze. So, if it lay on the ground for 8 centuries, where did all that precious bronze go? Well, the most dramatic story claims that a 7th century Arab force melted it down in 653 AD and sold it to a merchant who hauled it all away on a train of 900 camels. Sounds like a movie, right? But historians point out this is almost certainly fiction. It was likely just anti-Arab propaganda. The much more boring, practical reality? Over 800 years of earthquakes and changing religions, the locals just quietly scavenged the metal bit by bit, melting it down into everyday coins, tools, and weapons long before that raid ever supposedly happened. Which brings us to Section 6, the real Colossus legacy. Rebuilding a wonder? Despite physically disappearing, this thing has literally never left our imagination. And surprisingly, despite centuries of looking, we still don't know exactly where the original statue stood. It's a massive, ongoing archaeological debate. Local tradition claims it was at the Mondraki port entrance, pointing to a mysterious circle of sandstone blocks over at the fortress of St. Nicholas. But archaeologist Ursula Vetter argues it wasn't at the harbor at all. She believes it actually stood on a massive stone foundation up on the Acropolis of Rhodes, high on a hill overlooking the port, as part of a sanctuary to Helios. It's wild that we still don't know for sure. What's truly fascinating, though, is that people just keep trying to rebuild it. Back in 2008, an artist proposed a €200 million light sculpture made from melted-down weapons. Then in 2015, a group of architects pitched a $283 million, 150-meter-tall statue that would straddle the harbor and be entirely covered in solar panels. Both projects fizzled out, obviously, but they really prove the powerful hold this ancient wonder still has on us today. And that brings us to a final thought for you to ponder today. We definitely have the technology, the engineering, and clearly the ambition to recreate this monument now. But should the Colossus of Rhodes ever actually be rebuilt? Would erecting a giant, modern replica truly honor the incredible ancient achievement of cherries of Lindos? Or would it just become a colossal 21st century tourist trap? Are some wonders perhaps just a lot more powerful when left to the realm of history and our imagination? Let me know what you think. And thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.